Hello, black pupils. Hello, ye babayeros, ye babayazis. In other words, I just did a video, a serious video, and then it's turned off to America, China. And in other words, you guys have not had a serious conversation about anything. We have seen suits and ties, counters, and exceptions as an array being haven't been used remotely with fact-cheating nature, quality aspects in nature relative to the most critical things like black people's rights of eyes, how it is projected to us from the identity of that is with about everything. Therefore, order. For example, the body of order. It's the same body we are discerning. Where and how we have with different. We have the same eyes, just like fish, birds, etc. Mammals, vertebrate. In other words, we have with two eyes. We have quality aspects in nature distinct from other species' bodies, but non-distinct and simultaneous, but for that not us nor them. A distinct identity of simultaneous nature as a value/value progression. That is how and why. All these quality aspects of nature are non-distinct at the same time while they're distinct. It is a demonstration of how there is a hyper additional nature. There's a distinct identity of forever nature that is making more of itself through temporary/lasting space nature. Also, proofs of this are recorded, inherent to, active to, and progressive to the quality aspects and factory nature itself of people who pretend to other more probable, like the Big Bang. Nature, in other words, but nature shows us its singular body to an extent. It's the body that has us know that there are three parts of time that we know are true, our truth/truths always truths, and also positive unto itself. That which is, and also positive and negative at the same time. We are a quality of diffusion. But now this quality of diffusion has been through different systems than its own, abridged systems, and it has demonstrated. But the breaching method effectively employed roles with those demonstrations, blaming them on other things, others ourselves, like you do when anyone brings up how we have black pupils, whites of eyes. It is inseparable from subjects like slavery. It is just like witch trials are, regardless if who made them up, just like the rest of the laws were. Seriousness is about taking those laws with the predicate acts with facts methods. Now we're speaking about predicate acts. Oh, but it's who acts. Let's see who's acts. Let's talk about predicate acts with facts. This breaching method showed at countries A through Z, the suits, ties, counters, exceptions, the names of the people, the sciences, they can't afford to have to be, let alone to protract, to be heard, let alone to protract. Short words with convictions proper by nature. Order, it shows us to appreciate the hyper invisible but still discernible. It is an inseparable part from everything, therefore from all parts of English grammar and from other grammars. Like, for example, the parts of speech, like the subject, the verb. We need more than one. Those are the invisible but still discernible. And why and how we need more than one verb to appreciate the identity we are appreciating here of that distinct identity of hyper-simultaneous nature, a distinct identity that is hyper-native, pure, of countries A through Z, but not one speaks for that here, Anthony. Boxing, martial arts, and wrestling are grouped by the identity the sciences share. But the sciences have been, the rules have been abridged since them ancient times, pretending other two screening it. So it has not shown what the human species body of individual bodies and all group differences have been demonstrated. And when we try to do this, anybody who tries to appreciate it properly, that body is sensed and it is adapted to, including if that body is a majority of people, including if it is everybody. It is recorded where and how this breaching method has self-valued roles, replacing and having self-valued, having had replaced what James Madison and our founders communicated for themselves, which beginning with, there was no one had free speech. And second, it's on a simultaneously / hyper simultaneously. They had to pretend other to an extent, otherwise be they would be sensed. That body, including if it was a majority of people, including if it was everyone, of a colony, of a state, of a country, any grouping of countries that comes from locations, areas, and states entertained as is. It is fact, achieving nature, quality aspects of nature, being and having been used hypercriminally foreign influenced by a method too that knew and maintains everyone only allowed to blame other things, others, or selves, including things until that was his real. And then modern religions were born. Already the counter to the real things, even though both sides were being hurt by the same thing, even though it was through their own hands. Just like the roles, like Uncle Tom. In other words, and these are people in the same homes together that were built tactically denatured. This is a conversation about freedom that is stolen, the integrity of it. There has been a hyper archetypal predator involved with the conversations in every classroom and every campus A through Z, and has used the difference of that too to hide behind. But everyone hiding for it with hyper additional motivations, needs, interests. What was my job? That's how we were trained to do it. They have the experts on the names. They have the science people with criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, wrought principled treatments of American history. That's why one of the reasons why, demonstrably, why our founders. I read that we were directed to refer to them plural as James Madison singular, and then they went and got George Washington to agree to help them and to use that plan. George Washington, some leftover military he had, didn't have means to counter the internationally monitored conversations and laws and use/us of them roles, hyper additionally that everyone had, otherwise that body was sentenced. Northern colonies and southern colonies too, to keep it clear. The breaching, but then already the breaching that had slavery, breaching that had slavery was against blacks, sickly, distinctly, but was against everyone too. There are even with exceptions, specifically, to keep descriptions of it entangled exactly the way it needs to have people look back and argue with their seeings of history. The suburbs contain quality aspects in nature that are criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence, from America to Russia to Ukraine. All trade. So in other words, in Palestine and Israel, psychiatry has been roles right through world wars and the Civil War. They have roles with criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, wrought takes on American history, and uses of their own differences and of other people's, including their sexual proclivities and natures, being haven't been used remotely. All kinds of natures of identity theft, fraud, slander, and scams, way more than that reported in the news. Hartford Hospital has a bunch of people tied to Wethersfield Police, and a whole bunch of people to the same house/s from other areas have been planting evidence on my street, all sides of my house, since I was a kid, including with my algebra teacher, with sexually repeated things about a girl in one of the houses. I even met her. And they have fire departments involved here, trying to plant fake motivations, nature's needs, and their descriptions of what happens at instances. These are criminally foreign influence uses of federal agencies, corruption, and of states' rights too. Where they have, these are the same people speaking about states' rights and federal rights and made addiction, and they want to defend that. That's all being and haven't been used remotely, leaving out exception nature, self-valued, pretending other, making fake exceptions, self-valuing fake exceptions. Exception nature too, in the form of predicate acts with facts, method/s, and semi into the databases and into the minds of and memory of and voices of or non-voices too, because it does both. Of the people next to databases and further at the campuses where the names of the people of the sciences are manifest, including all exception nature, like homeschool, the different types of campuses, even fire and medical campuses. They are used by this method shown needs to hide lies and life progressions because of past uses of differences with We're faking and changing details as collusion slash S increasingly at countries A through Z. There was not just the scientific value of a human fact treating nature breaching method. Two, there's that distinct identity of simultaneous nature that shows us it's using species bodies to show us its own body. Because we didn't invent how all these different species have a species individual body of individuals with all group differences being generated by the identity that generates not just our species, but other species too. And again, it's showing us all exceptions, exception that come with demonstration slash S of the same thing slash S that we could ignore, but it will demonstrate that. We could get it wrong, but as long as we're trying to get it right, it will demonstrate too. Well, and will still show us how to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures that are hyper positive, not criminal insidiousness natures are positive. There are criminal insidiousness natures of facts treatments, truth treatments, and motivations. A breaching method is at countries A through Z involved with the motivations of people where they have fact treatment nature quality aspects in nature that enable them to get away with even pretending it's debatable that the suburbs, let alone the cities, and how the suburban slash urban Hartford is manifest. Descriptions of it are tactical ulterior from how our founders communicated for us to understand about it. You guys have sick people, and then you guys went with jobs. Oh, because look at the people in the background and think about it. And like especially the New York rappers with those big buildings behind them, and then some moron with a suit and tie, it's black or white or whatever. In other words, so get a job. Look at the jobs there, and then then go try to tell that person, I want to talk about the predicate acts with facts because the police say they're involved with some interracial, some KKK, black theme, Latino theme military, and they're involved with identity theft, fraud, slander. And they're involved with your place. Oh, but that's not my thing. But that's not my job. And then everyone push to the next job. Then they want to have debates about power too. Tactical terror from how nature communicates for us to appreciate power. Order is about being led by the hyper invisible but still discernible. Nature shows us it is functional, how its identity is hyper invisible but still discernible. The present participle and the past participle, for example, these are also hyper additional names for a verb. And why and how we are appreciating that comes with discernment of a third part, as the part noted by the slash, with the present participle and last part. I forget the slash there. In other words, there's a trinity though. Those three parts of time that we are shown the value of time, seasons, to an extent, even if they never get here again. To an extent, we are showing its complete identity relationship to itself. And the value of that. We're showing its complete identity to an extent where we are showing that we have two eyes and other species bodies have two eyes. Again, it's per that which is not us nor them, but is all things anyway. We can observe this with art. It is the difference of while as is coming to, from, as, with, and for the smallest finite detail, or the order of the finite, distinctly, non-distinctly, simultaneously, slash hyper simultaneously, the same way, with the order of what is acted or grouped. And remember, too, the finite, we are the individual finite body and a simultaneous nature as a human species body. That is an individual body of individuals with all group differences and demonstration of the individual hyper invisible, distinct identity of hyper invisible, but still discernible. The present participle and the past participle note their roles with time, and to appreciate it this way. Where how again we are showing the body of forever nature that English was revealed to be taught about. See alpha in the name alphabet. And see yin yang. Yin yang and alpha and omega are more probably having been revealed together and more practically too, as we'll observe, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, rot. Takes, natures of debate too, quality aspects in nature of debate regarding all kinds of subject treatments. It is not a breaching method measured and maintains. You guys can't appreciate witch trials, regardless of who made them up, what motivation, what they're about. You separate that subject from slavery, which was entrenched northern colonies, southern colonies, while you're wasting time more and more separating different subjects that are inseparable from the answer /S. I tell best so many ways, boxing. So they have the law identities, pretending passions and emotions regarding Marbury versus Madison, while the history experts are measured and maintain self-valued roles with criminal insidiousness, natures of replacing with James Madison's, right from the communications of James Madison was replaced and is replaced. The scientific value of the human fact treatment nature breaching method. That is one of the things true always. That both witch trials, slavery, northern colonies, southern colonies, and the Civil War, but they were true about always. They're also true hyper additionally about James Madison's plan and the founders behind him, and we were directed to appreciate them as president / chief. And James Madison's plan shows that the rest of the colonists and the rest of the Native Americans had to be counter-extorted, to be forced to counter the crazy countries that were themselves used remotely, individually grouped and together. This breaching method effectively, observably used and uses roles with names A through Z, with differences A through Z, individually grouped and together. Self-value, being and having been used remotely, self-value through an as systems tactical ulterior from the one that is Y. That is the difference of A through Z. Therefore, names A through Z. Not one. See here, Anthony. Boxing, martial arts, and wrestling. They are grouped by the identity that shows us how and why it is functional, why the sciences appear not to share an identity. But those exception nature, come with a demonstration /S of how they do, and of a special difference, not just of Earth's, but of our own. And we could ignore it, how it appreciates a special difference. The identity that is already relativity to all space / existence, equally positive and negative, but as a quality of diffusion. As you, so you know what it's like, wanting and needing to be more and more positive onto itself. But now the breaching method employed that the only way people A through Z could cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures, while the breaching method was and is having nature demonstrated with increasing negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. People, when they make statistics and compare time, they leave out how there are cameras. If there were cameras in the past, there would have been way less crimes. And the statistics locations and the polling locations, they are recorded originally and still involve all kinds of methods and natures of fact treatment nature, predicate acts with facts, methods, and natures of organized crime. I'm not a lawyer, not police form, not criminal, not journalist. Journalists are originally still all sides of criminal and civil cases, and journalists, and the courts, the police forms, overt criminal enterprise, private ones, even when they're not in the cases. That's how long they've been. The difference of guilt there or there too. The precedents and statutes readings that were built upon. The principles replaced at each age of nature of fact treatment nature, and how they agreed to deal with subjects. It was as reliant upon an expert lean that is criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence. This breaching method knew that could get other things, others ourselves, blamed for things they caused, and then have them hurt that, and then have that respond, and it has truths being used for lies by the same people and being done while being used remotely. criminally foreign influence, hyper criminally foreign influence. So it wants and needs people to blame things like criminal and foreign influences, even when correctly. Exactly wrong the way the breaching method wanted and needs. Just like names are only capable of doing at the locations, areas, and states in America and in China, and in countries A through Z, cannot afford a quality of fact-cheating nature necessary to appreciate yin yang or alpha and omega, let alone them simultaneously / hyper simultaneously, as we should. This is more probably how the ancients taught about what is now referred to as Boolean logic. And the ancients, and when nature shows us to, and science shows us to appreciate exception nature, tactical ulterior than we are being have been allowed to. People have pretended they're not to realize the imposition of people pretending they're worth just because, even if it's all they barely surviving on money, or if they have wealth, either one, jumping in and changing and faking, enforcing that not told on, and changing and faking what people say about it, because it's about predicate acts, changing what our founders communicated about it, the economies. The economies were forced by a torture, extortion, slavery method. You guys have self-value rules of pretending you wanted, even though you didn't know what to do, so you self-value rules, putting torture, allowing people to put torture. In other words, also extremism, the words like extremism and radical, they are used to measure and to maintain criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw fact-cheating nature, quality aspects, and nature of experts, and uses of knowledge of good and evil, of good and of evil. In other words, and that's not to put it with faith. For example, the beginning of the Old Testament says it has a part with a tree of life and a tree of good and evil, but that comes after the part where in the Old Testament says only defend, right here, where the names of the people, the sciences will come together, and the part that comes before it. Again, that is before the tree of life and knowledge of good and evil, and the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Adam and Eve, and the names of their generation after that. In other words, but you guys can't be honest about the names of the people, the sciences, and the part before it. So you can't be honest about the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So you can't be honest about the difference between the part that came before it or that, and the value of that. While self-valuing sequence shifts, no, as you are doing with narratives regarding the World Trade Center attack, as you're doing with the passions and emotions of people like former Senator Weldon, and people that he disagrees with, as an array being and having been used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw. All you have to do is address the judicial branch offices of Connecticut and the corrections offices are increasingly involved with names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, putting sequence shifts at the same time with them, and the motivations for it were also recorded. But that's why you guys need to get them from switching names and forging names and onto paper with the Wethersfield police too. More than one Wethersfield police chief retired, involved with their intimate ties too, with an 80 Carroll Hill Drive, involved with a Phil Collo, involved with bad violence, identity theft and frauds, with a whole bunch of other people with judges and prosecutors tied to the same house too, the 80 Carroll Hill Drive, and people with the name Ray Collo, involved also with wire crimes with them and digital crimes with them, including with the syntax regarding psychedelics, has something to do with his roles with Ray Collo and his confessions regarding Tim O'Brien, Ray Collo, and a Brendan Leahy and a Brian Silver, and their roles with the sides of Central Connecticut State University. And that kid, I didn't even know who it was, and then he was an adult. He made confessions to me. Kyle Gill. He recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed he had roles with people. He doesn't know this, but former director of the I don't know if he knows about former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his co-defendants and their family members. They're involved with people of Hartford courts in the Britain Superior Court and Connecticut's District Court with all kinds of natures of organized crime, criminally foreign influence uses of investigators at and next to the campuses, including campuses like Central Connecticut State University, filmed 24/7. They're putting fake and changed things recorded, putting fake transcripts on campuses filmed 24/7, but fake ties, fake natures of ties to people. Part of what is used to keep cover-ups of already having been used, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw investigators, and they are shown needs to hide this preemptively by having their pictures taken around people at parks. A Danielle Perron and a Thomas Perron have their intimate ties involved with them planting evidences at parks and at the corner of Southstein Highway and Town Line Drive are increasingly people with mayors, a former congressman, Lieberman, reportedly a former relative of a Congressman Larson, involved with a Mike DeMaine and Adam DeMaine and their family and their neighbors with sexual and medical offenders. And my algebra class teacher repeated sexual things, and they made a religious theme, Jewish. And Ray Clough, and I never hung around with Ray Clough and John Maiano. After Ray Clough graduated, I was supposed to graduate. The reason I stayed back too is increasingly the Washington, D.C. people and World Trade Center people have roles of predicate acts with facts with two speech class teachers. I never had a personal conversation with them. That's one of the ways it's recorded too. All along from the old Wethersfield and the founding locations, all along that route and its conjunctions is involved with people with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and with those two speech class teachers I had, and the subjects of my speeches. They're changing and faking it. Hartford Hospital increasingly has roles with a Christopher Walters and a Mike Pandolf and an Eric Jensen and a Mike Violet, their mother, people with UConn with their roles with Hartford Hospital. Tactical delusions rock, criminally foreign influence, all kinds of natures of organized crime. While tactical delusions rock, but especially psychology, it's concentrated there because they have judges and prosecutors speaking fake things and change things into records, including as collusions with digital and phone crime methods. And Wethersfield police attached me to fake conversations with them as a kid and then as an adult. You wouldn't believe how much they're charging people and charging on programs like Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. The triage at Hartford Hospital, the security with the military and the other natures of security with Hartford Hospital and next to them. They're involved with the businesses and houses next to them, foreign and domestic military leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context and since. They recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. People involved with it have a Jonathan Maiano, an Alex Maiano. And I don't know, I believe it, I heard Ray Clough repeated the name Marco. I don't know those people. And the mother, I walked by her 1 second. She said she's involved with identity theft, fraud, slander to me. These are people that are lying to my families behind my back too. I don't know if his mother did or what her name is. And his father is involved with the Modern Pastry, involved also with the Mazzucato Bakery, with intimate ties to retired police chiefs from Wethersfield and a bunch of retired, at least two, from Wethersfield, retired detectives. But then there were other natures of police involved with the upskirt natures and other natures of worse than that I recorded with them involved with forcing. And they've been changing and faking what's recorded on campuses when they get caught. Then they play games with the difference between parents or family members. And they bring in other kids when their names weren't even brought in. They're increasingly attaching little kids to fake and change communications with their family members and with their neighbors, etc. They're doing the same thing with their family members. Well, above with them, they're playing a game here, and you guys are not allowed by the law to do it. But you're saying, well, that guy's the law. The law is not allowed to do it, but they're saying, well, that guy's the history. You better understand the principle of James Madison's plan to force it. The other founders, because it was going to be forced, and everyone was going to be worse. The other founders, and other citizens, as those very special, the other founders as Native Americans, 100% are Native Americans, but 1/3 of them are still being forced to be Americans. And we never made it anyway. We might not ever make it. So please join. And I know no one's there with it, ready for you, ready to receive you, and to hand you the rest of your human species bodies means to fix the tactically denatured identity of ground's relationship to itself, and the value of that, hyper additionally from ourselves, and then in yourself too. The ground below our feet at countries A through Z is tactically denatured, including its landscape theater, clearer than day. It is more probable, many ways, that it is more, in other words, that there's a mountain range. Look at that mountain range. It looks like they took down a mountain. There are proofs that they took down a mountain in America, in Mexico, what is now in Mexico, and they took down a mountain range in Africa and made the deserts to take away how nature works. With the top of the mountains freeze, there's constantly perspiration or water going down, condensation, and then it becomes the ground stops becoming porous, and water starts to flow, and fresh water goes to sea. That helps to clean the sea. What do? One little species body polluted the entire ocean. And we're only one species, but we are criminally foreign influenced. And while self-value, because that's haven't been used remotely at countries A through Z, any grouping of countries too. It knew that their voices would be locations, areas, and states self-value, campuses A through Z, and the difference. It's not haven't been used remotely. It's not competition. People have to pretend such things. But in other words, you guys were child abused. You better understand these principles of American history, because other people's histories too. There are proofs that in China they have changed the communications of Mao Zedong too. He didn't. I don't know what he said exactly, but there are proofs that he wants us to counter the hyper foreign, just like James Madison does, which is distinct from foreign. There are proofs that there is a hyper archetypal criminal enterprise method, even if it's no longer manifest. It constructed, self-cultivated roles, blaming others ourselves for what the breaching method caused. We should have no nature of debate capable of being regarding how sickly distinctly, but also sickly non-distinctly, through different countries, slavery was entrenched, northern colonies, southern colonies, and then our founders were born. And then they got behind James Madison's plan. And then they went and got George Washington to agree. Everyone counter-extorted, and have been counter-extort everyone else. We're not even allowed to be honest about the extortion of George Washington. The names of the people of the sciences have been self-out, used remotely, using and having used. The words of the sciences, the names of the people of the sciences were used remotely. Criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw too. So in other words, then we have to say that, and it's like we're being mean to them. It's inseparable from the subject of slavery, having black people's rights of eyes. And while they're being mean to the kids too, there's a troublemaker in the classroom that's not even present too. Forgiveness is so we don't leave out the breaching method. Nature itself shows us a human fact, human nature breaching method is one of the things true always, that both simultaneously, witch trials are about the crazy slavery laws against everyone, sickly, distinctly north and south. You hear music saying, oh, the people with this, because that's just our free speech. We're wanting to tell it that way. They wouldn't have told it that way if they understood what was going on. You guys have nature's debate that contain quality aspects of nature, sense and sensibilities that are used remotely by a breaching method, so it could adapt to any body with syntax proper, including if it has a majority of people, including if it has every name from of a country that could only be operated by locations, areas, and states. The suburbs were designed before America's boundaries were born for a torture, extortion, slavery method. You have people who will jump in and pretend such is debatable. They can't afford the hyper evidential that could be used for evidences. There are wire crime acts and methods that Weathersfield police use. They have roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders with multiple other departments and federal agencies and courts and people at the judicial branch offices next to it in its conjunctions, at the corrections offices next to it in its conjunctions. Facebook has collusions with them. The differences of guilt was it self-value by themselves, having been used remotely, self-value that too, used by the breaching method that knows that nature communicates to us about difference. We have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time. And even with that too, hyper-additioning from how the same color eyes are white and black. We have all the revelations that come with this replaced. And our founders' communications about it. And our founders communicated they did not have free speech. People want to have nature debate about that and use their knowledge of history out of sequence too. I don't care if you know what battle was what in the Civil War. James Madison's plane crossed it. You guys are wasting time. Fix the fake news. Get me off the fake conversation with WFSB and with the Britain Superior Court and with the Harper courts. And have Emily tell him, because I'm sorry, Emily or Amy, what your name is. Eric Burgess begged that I didn't tell you things. And I was going to wait because I didn't know it was a former director of the FBI. Former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants, their family members, their neighbors, and their lawyer, and people next to their lawyer, which is not far from your house. I'm involved also with a Daryl Chandler with more sexual and medical offenders of kids. So please get those judges. I want that Officer Hunter too that was in the court in Hartford when you were there after the World Trade Center attack. These are one of the ones involved with before the World Trade Center attack. And you know my Saudi friend, she involved with one named Mendez with the Weathersfield Police Department. Attached me to fake conversations with him, the older one, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders. And when I was a kid, there were police that attached me to fake conversations there too. And they pretended that through the news too. We're going to have to get them on paper because they've been switching and forging names inter-branch. Other courts too, the district court, a bunch of people from the Britain Superior Court. You know that I told you that about that part of his confessions. And these are also people on New Park Avenue for him too. And I have a trainer that lived near there. And these are people spreading lies about me at the gyms with former director of the FBI in the former foreign countries, a whole bunch of other countries too. These are people from Weathersfield, Connecticut, on off the state judicial branch offices, on off the state corrections offices, also with houses near me involved with them, with ongoing, with police, with wire crime, mail crimes, and refusing to identify themselves legitimately, with people from other areas who've been planting evidence on all sides of my house, including various natures of federal criminals and people who are involved with home break-ins through the years. And time use / as if it rolled with other names not even there, because these are people involved with wire crimes with the Weathersfield, all kinds of predicate acts with fax methods with the people tied to databases, including people with courts and police. It's concentrated at the Britain Superior Court with the people involved through time since I was a kid. Now they're not getting on paper so they can play games and change the fake things that are recorded at places. That's what they do. They never stopped faking evidences in courts. These are people with the corrections offices too, increasingly with people with prisons involved with crimes with their patients and criminals before they were caught, and names next to relative body dumping spots of totally different killings, and a serial killer, and that serial killer himself and his doctors had and have collusions with other natures of organized crime, and names that next to the body dumping spot involved. Whoa. No, in other words, I shouldn't have to beg. There's more that you guys are preventing me from telling on, which is already recorded anyway. And people confirm things on Facebook. People who are from other areas trying to put evidence on my street, fake ties, fake natures of ties to me. Then these people call. These are people interbranch putting fake identity theft frauds to cover them up there with their roles with the arrest with the crime scenes. And God knows what they're putting in the databases. In other words, let's get them on paper, one name and sequence, and get me off the fake conversations with the police as a kid, now as an adult, and apologize for that. WFSB too, and WTNH. Let's go because we have more. We have more of your sources involved with various natures of organized crime against too. I noted the same people involved against elderly, against kids, and against veterans. You watch how sick these psychiatry people are, and a whole bunch of people at Harper Hospital's Institute of Living involved with the same house slash S, and with the businesses and houses next to it, also on Facebook with organized crime acts and methods. Facebook has all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders rules. Watch, mother. Get them on paper, one name and sequence, too. Do what's right, Facebook. Get them with the Wethersfield Police and the New Britain Superior Court's Facebook pages with this Joshua Julian, too, with the Facebook page of the Principal Upskirt Natures campus. Further involved with the retired police chiefs and more with the security with the school. Feel God, too. Fear God, FBI, to get involved. Because we're going to bring in more agencies. You're going to hurt them. You don't just give up Luskin and the rest of them. Whatever, in the background, whoever's getting away. Because that's the fault. You're going to get on paper. I've been asking you to get on paper because I'm going to deal with the violence that way. Because there's a Phil Colo involved planting evidence on my street and involved with threats with a person the day before he came to on my street. After the Bob, that was the only time I ever saw him on my street. The Bob Chase. Also, it was after the Bob Chase confessed him involved. There's also people recording, confessing, demonstrating, confirmed too. I didn't have to talk to them. Some tremendous police brothers and their family members and their roles with people next to campuses, intercities, and with the cities. They have been putting fake transcripts in databases, all kinds of medicines crimes and drugs crimes, and other natures of organized crimes with people, foreign and domestic military too. Wethersfield campuses, Connecticut campuses, Hartford campuses. Let me show you what's right next to your schools and at your schools. Don't be fools. We're not going to leave out black pupils' whites of eyes this time. We're not going to pretend that science spoke honestly for New York City. We're not going to look past what's behind the people in the background of those rap videos. And we're going to say who disbelieves when we can discern that there is not legitimate science while it's pretending other and being and having been used remotely. Who disbelieves that? Remotely criminally foreign influence / hyper criminally foreign influence. We're not going to leave out the hyper foreign because it's not the nature of one. It's not the one as nature. We are hyper foreign from a hyper natural state, that which is hyper native pure, or else we sense. Native Americans are sickly, distinctly hurt from ourselves. And we're going to take care of this. We're going to bring potential, not the potential of the 455 P67 rocket launcher. We're going to learn how to speak about the impositions imposed by even peaceful nuclear generation, nuclear energy generation. It shuts people's up because now you have to keep things safe. You have to keep water going. Otherwise, it's a big nuclear disaster. And anything to give people a right to lie or to hide something, they're going to use it for something else, as the breaching method knew they would. The breaching method had all these countries locked here and there before and right through our country's foundings. That's how they got the suit and ties, counters, and exceptions having been used remotely, clearer than day. Many pray. Boxings. It's just things. Don't block their videos from working. Agencies. YouTube, they're doing it. They have a Joshua Julian, who's recorded on Facebook, a page of a Principal Upskirt Nature, involved with some black KKK Confederate flag theme with my neighbors, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with them at the police station attaching little kids and adults to fake conversations with themselves and with the people around them and their family members. They're sabotaging people's educations too by giving this all this hyper additional stuff to observe and think about. That is criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions. Right? You get them on paper. Let's get them on paper. I want a response for the principal's confessions to me. You don't want to know what they were? Who disbelieves they made confessions to me? Get me off the paper. They didn't even let me speak yet. They just had him call back a whole bunch of times to make it look like just because there was a bunch of calls, I got to speak. They're playing games here. What are they doing at the corner of Town Line Drive and South Street Highway? Get them on paper with the whole judicial branch offices. Let's go. And the ones next to them, like the Fianza. Let's go.